Neeks Peeks back in that action. I caught some flu on you guys, but I'm back. Today we're going to talk about informants, the 10th discovery request, and why I believe that has to be related to informants in the case, and some evidence, of course, that I want to show you guys about why I have this particular theory. People get super miffed in this case if you talk about a drug hit or the house being a drug house. It's perfectly okay in the internet debates that will rage on about the Idaho4 murders to call it the party house. Sadly, if it were 4 homeless victims who had been murdered, I highly doubt that it would get the amount of national attention that it's gotten. It's just a sad and true American story. But 4 perfect victims, well, that gets the nation hooked every time. In those internet debates, boy, insults are flying for those who suggest a hit job. They're accused of wild fantasies and unfounded theories.
This body cam image and the white car, is this the white car investigators are looking for?
So the body cam image that is out there from an officer who was on a call with an alcohol offense does have a white vehicle in it. This is not the vehicle that we are looking for. So we wanted to clear that up with all news media.
And just remember, the Dean of Students Office probably will be contacting you about this as well, about student code of conduct issues.
Yes, I have. What's the telephone number?
Susanna, you guys ready back?
Thank you so much.
Any questions?
No questions.
Let's jump right on into the scales of justice when it comes to the perfect victim and the perfect circumstance around the public really giving a shit if you live or if you die. I had an addict parent myself. In fact, my dad died in the trap house. So I have personal knowledge as to how the cops react and how the hospital, society, social workers, Medicaid workers, food stamp workers, you name it, disability, all that shit, how they treat victims in today's society and the scales of justice and the way that they tip. So first and foremost, I will say that it does not lower the value of our victims at all to recognize faults or certain things that may have been going on in their lives. A part of those certain things is the fact that they all had multiple bank accounts and enough warrants served through credit unions with all of their names on it and with 3 other names redacted, presumably the quote-unquote 2 surviving roommates and possibly the 6th roommate. The absolute only one that they didn't all get named on via the warrants for searching these financial institutions was Ellen Financial Services, for which Kaylee had an account and no one else, or at least Kaylee was listed on the warrant and no one else. Now, why are cops interested in you having 10 to 15 bank accounts or multiple bank accounts is pertaining to the crime of money laundering. Am I saying the 4 victims were laundering money? No. But I am saying that it's super suspect that they have this many financial institutions. It's even more suspect that they would all be named on warrants for this many financial warrants, and what that has to do with the crimes themselves or whatever network may be responsible for the crimes themselves.
That an attorney filed separate notices of tort claims with the University of Idaho and Idaho State Police, in addition to the city of Moscow. This puts the university, ISP, and the city on notice.
Attorney Shannon Gray sent Moscow these tort claim notices on May 3rd on behalf of Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogan's families. He said the families plan to seek damages from the city and any of its agencies related.
Now we're going to look at this little doozy. This came straight from the Moscow PD through the work of the Quad Cities Task Force. And it read, informant used to build a case against Moscow businessman, Moscow Pullman Daily News, with these 2 mugshots being featured. Now, Blaker, the one I told you was one of the lead detectives in the probable cause affidavit for Bryan Kohberger, was also the probable cause affiant for this particular case. As I said, he was running the Quad Cities Task Force for Moscow. And according to the probable cause affidavit, it began with an investigation into 2 defendants, January 2013. And Blaker began controlled buys that following January. It involved them legit going into the high-tech nails place to purchase as much heroin as $300 could buy. Ironically, this case was also seen in front of Judge Latah County Magistrate Court, back before John Judge was the district judge, I suppose. They were both charged with 17 felony counts of drug-related charges as co-defendants. Now, you'll note that during 10 months of this investigation, they conducted more than 8 controlled buys that led to these charges. Notably, various locations in Moscow were the location of these controlled buys, and it included the Palooza Mall parking lot, high-tech nails, a zip trip, and the parking lot on Main Street inside McDonald's West Pullman Road, the Antique Mall parking lot on Main Street, Walgreens on Main Street, and Things residence, according to the probable cause affidavit. Controlled buys at their residence, at McDonald's, the zip trip, high-tech nails, whatever downtown Main Street parking lot. Oh, you mean like where the grub truck was at? That's right, buddy. A few of these places you could spit on from the grub truck, including the Main Street Antique Mall. As you can see, its walking distance is a whopping 2 minutes. That's why I think that the missing hours from Xana and Ethan's night are very important, and I also believe that the grub truck footage is footage of a controlled buy in a public place where they always take place. You might be saying, why would they do that in the public? They practically always do it in the public. At least 50% of them are going down in the public, you guys, and I believe that this is why those civil cases are sought against Moscow City Police Department, because I believe, obviously, since they were going to be sleeping in the vicinity of the Moscow City Police Department's jurisdiction, I don't believe that the Moscow City Police protected them, and I believe that that's why the cause for this civil lawsuit is the murder or homicide of these young adults.
They sent Moscow these tort claim. Families plan to seek damages from the city and any of its agencies related to the stabbing deaths of Kaylee and Maddie at their home just off campus on November 13th of last year. Gray said the amount that they're seeking is undetermined at this time.
In the documents 7 Investigates received, Gray did not describe the conduct or circumstances that led to the damage. Under Idaho law, if Moscow doesn't respond in the next 3 months, the families could file a lawsuit within 2 years. We reached out to Gray for comment, but haven't heard back yet.
Forces that team up with the Quad Cities Task Force through the Moscow City Police Department, the Pullman Police, and WSU's patrol as well, going all the way into Washington State Patrol, the Idaho State Police, and the ATF.
Has this case changed any policies within the Moscow Police Department or changed the way that you go about investigating?
It is not. We've always been very quick to secure scenes. We've always been very quick to call in ISP, and we've always been very quick to call in our federal partners, FBI, ATF, depending on the type of the case, of who we need the specialty from. So I know there's a lot of confusion out there that we're a small department, but we do utilize our resources and we utilize them very well.
In one of their weird non-press conferences that they get together with their publicity team and they answer a bunch of questions that they decide to answer and pose, shot right at the Moscow Police Department. Super weird. Moral of the story, you can actually hear the chief talk about ATF during his line of Idaho4 questioning. The Moscow City Police Department actually has an office on the University of Idaho campus. It's centered in Memorial Gym. Ironically, the university itself on the website calls this their most mysterious of the historical buildings on campus. Couldn't agree more. But as I was doing some research into the Quad Cities Task Force in general and some of the actual statistics from their searches and seizures, you can actually see that in 2021, the entire Quad Cities Task Force seized absolutely no fentanyl. And then we see 6,000 pills being seized in 2022, which is not that many comparative to what a lot of the task force in the state and in Washington Washington it's not even close to what some of the surrounding states and areas are confiscating and reporting. So I'd actually wondered if they had gotten into a little ditty themselves and possibly the feds were looking into the Quad Cities Task Force, because this does happen from time to time. We see public corruption cases where the feds will actually be the criminals who the task force is attempting to coerce and enslave, right? Basically. All right, so everyone blew off the TikToker who first approached the informant issue. Everyone was like, no, that's just the language of discovery. And I agree with them as far as it pertains to the first discovery. The first request for discovery will sometimes contain specific information that the prosecution won't actually be bringing up or that otherwise aren't pertinent to a particular defendant's case. However, I can absolutely promise you that in response to that, if it were one of those cases where Anne had mentioned an informant as a wild theory that possibly may come up at some point in time, certainly the prosecutor would not respond specifically to that request while also simultaneously praying the court for appropriate protective orders pursuant to not disclosing information about any informant who's not going to be produced as a witness. A lot of people also mistakenly think that an informant can't give information without being produced as a witness, and they would again be wrong about that. Now, for anyone who is not particularly savvy when it comes to using informants in trial, I'm going to highlight those statutes that are going to show you very clearly, and so that you can see for yourself, witness indeed does not have to be cross-examined nor identified according to certain standards in the state of Idaho and in multiple states and even on a federal level. Now, recently in a Congress hearing, that is deserving of its very own episode because Congress actually chewed out the DEA's ass during that Congress hearing, as it is explained pertinent to undercover investigations, etc. What happens is an informant will bring into the criminal organization an undercover, and that undercover will be often used under oath and identified by the court or to the defendant as being less dangerous or intrusive to a civilian who is working as an informant for the police. So the short way of saying that is that they absolutely will not be called as a witness sometimes, while simultaneously the prosecution will be attempting to use an unnamed informant's information in a case. And there have been cases where defense attorneys are able to get that information turned over, and there have been cases where they absolutely cannot get that information turned over. Recently, there has been one highlighted in Idaho's law pertaining to giving the instructions that informants are to abide by, or the agents who are controlling those informants are to abide by. And an Idaho court decided, due to the way that it had been argued, basically a pro se defendant argued that they should have to give this up, but he was trying to argue that the informant had been misused by law enforcement, and Idaho had decided that in no way would it be an appealable issue for you to say that law enforcement unconstitutionally did something to someone else. Or, so Jane can't go to court and say, well, informant A was misused by the DEA because, they broke informant A's constitutional right. They don't care about that. It has to be something that was done and attributed to you, the defendant, not informant A or whoever, Jane's friends and whatever. So as you can see, not only will that be protected, but also protective orders will be issued that will keep the entire text of that party's statement out of the public record. And I believe that's probably what we have going on here with, quote unquote, one of these surviving victims. Recently, since the Idaho court decided to actually hand over the IGG information, I'm now able to bring up the fact that the 10th discovery request by counsel for Kohberger is obviously pertaining to this informant or information, the identity of, or something pertinent to the informant. Now, I've known this all along, but I've had to pick and choose my battles, and I've not brought it up yet because many people are going to argue that that was the IGG information. However, the supplemental discovery requests have mostly been sealed. We've barely seen any of them at all. And there's only been, I think, maybe one, possibly two of prosecution's response to those supplemental discoveries that have been actually published and are available for us to analyze. So due to the judge deciding that prosecutors will have to hand that over, and on the same day that that order was actually published, of course, we already knew that Kohberger had won this argument, or Kohberger's team had won this argument, because finally, right, it was publicized for us to see. An order with a date on it for the prosecution to turn over the IGG information, and even despite them having already won this argument, we see a 10th request for supplemental discovery for defendant, and everything is sealed in that case. Everything pertinent to that document has been sealed. We don't get to see any of it. And we got to see the entire arguments pretty much about the IGG, right? That's never really been something that they kept out of the public's eye, other than the actual dates that they happened and, other skeezy things that the prosecution has been trying to keep on the DL. But the argument for IGG info, you feel me? That's always been out in the open. That's never been sealed. That's not a part of what they're arguing about. I guarantee you it's about the informant. So the Daily Evergreen did an interview with the Pullman Police Chief Gary Jenkins. This is the same chief that interviewed Kohberger for the internship job. Now, he talked about the task force, and the task force being overseen by a board composed of sheriffs and chiefs from each participating agency. He said the task forces track drugs that come from the Tri-Cities and Spokane. One of the interviewees actually talked about a fraternity which was pressing their own Xanax pills in Pullman. He stated it was a large operation. People from Seattle came to Pullman to purchase those drugs. They further stated most of their cases involve meth and heroin. In Pullman, cocaine and Molly are prevalent, he said. They seize vehicles, property, money.
Advantage of this extended time to gather measurements of their own of the home to construct a model. Now, throughout the day, we saw crews gathering images coming in and out of the home and even bringing out what's left over as far as personal belongings and moving them outside.
2 fries. It's a stunt double, you guys. All types of odd University of Idaho involvement in this case, just left and right. And my newest complaint was that they recently reported that the FBI was taking more scans that we know Moscow City PD had already taken. And they claim that they're like speaking for the FBI or something, although no one there was uniformed in anything where you could actually identify what law enforcement they were there for. But we certainly see many officers that we know work for MPD outside during those scans, and I don't believe the university. Not only that, but why in the hell is the university giving us updates about the Moscow house, about a Moscow high-profile crime, about a Moscow high-profile murder? That just makes no damn sense to me, you guys. And the FBI's not told us that they've taken scans. MPD's not told us they're taking scans. Only U of I reports it, and then reports, by the way, they won't be talking to you guys about any of this stuff we're reporting. And I believe them about as far as I could throw them, as my mother would say.
We first told you about last night involving a major drug bust at 3 North Carolina universities. Officers seized thousands of pounds of marijuana, thousands of kilograms of cocaine at App State, UNC Chapel Hill, and Duke University.
Hey, good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us. Breaking news right now out of Orange County.
That's right, a massive drug trafficking network involving students from 3 North Carolina colleges and universities.
Pounds of marijuana, hundreds of kilograms of cocaine, Xanax, steroids. The list really just continues here. And the total amount of money stemming from this network is more than $1.5 million.
Nearly 24 people now facing charges after a major trafficking bust in Orange County. It involves 3 North Carolina colleges